Hi, I'm Isabella, 28, and I still remember the day my parents handed me a trifold brochure for a community college like it was a golden ticket. Meanwhile, my twin sister, Chloe, stood beside me holding an envelope labeled, "For Chloe Tuition Deposit, Columbia University." The check inside was for $35,000. I laughed at first. I thought it was a joke. We'd both grown up hearing that we were two sides of the same coin. Except, apparently, my side was worth about a semester of night classes and a bus pass. Chloe's was an Ivy League education and a future my parents couldn't stop bragging about. My mom said it so casually that day, like she was announcing dinner plans. "Lila, honey, community college is a great fit for you. You're more hands-on, more practical." Meanwhile, Dad was already researching Columbia dorm packages for Chloe, muttering things like, "Our investment in potential has to be strategic." That phrase, investment in potential, it burned into me. Because I worked my ass off in high school. Same grades as Chloe. Better attendance. I even helped her finish her college essays when she got too anxious to start them. But when decision letters came in, the difference between us wasn't merit, it was favoritism dressed as logic. When I protested, Mom sighed and said, "Lila, we love you equally, but Chloe just thrives in academic settings. You'll thrive wherever you go." That's the kind of thing parents say when they're about to hand you the short end of the stick and call it character building. I went to my room that night, shut the door, and stared at the brochure like it was a death certificate for the future I'd dreamed of. My sister came in, awkwardly holding her acceptance letter. "You're not mad, are you?" she asked. I lied and said no. But the truth? I wasn't mad, yet I was humiliated. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to see my entire life. My parents didn't just love Chloe more, they believed in her more. And that kind of difference cuts deeper than jealousy. It rewrites who you think you are. That night, I made a promise to myself if they saw me as second best, I'd stop trying to prove I wasn't. And that decision would eventually blow our entire family apart. The thing about being the other twin is that people think your life is some mirror image that you get half the attention, half the praise, half the everything. But that's not how it works. It's not split evenly. It's siphoned. One twin gets the spotlight, and the other gets the shadows. After the whole investment in potential speech, I tried to move on. I told myself I'd prove them wrong, that community college could still be a stepping stone, that I'd make something of myself without their blessing. But it's hard to chase dreams when your parents treat yours like charity work. At every family dinner, the conversation was some version of Chloe's thriving. My dad would beam over her 4.0 GPA, her internships, her professors who called her a natural leader. Then, after a pause long enough to make it sting, my mom would turn to me and ask, "How's that business class going, sweetie?" Like she couldn't even remember the name of my program. And the worst part? Chloe didn't even flaunt it. She wasn't cruel. She just existed in the space they gave her, and that space was huge, expansive enough to hold her confidence, her ambitions, her endless validation. Mine, on the other hand, was cramped and dim. I worked 2 part-time jobs while studying retail during the day, tutoring at night. I paid for my textbooks while Chloe got academic gifts. When I mentioned wanting to transfer to a university, my dad actually laughed. Not meanly, which somehow made it worse, just this small, dismissive chuckle. "Sweetheart, transferring is expensive. Let's not overextend ourselves." Ourselves? He meant me. I didn't cry that night. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, realizing that I could do everything right and it still wouldn't be enough. Because the game had been decided long before I even knew I was playing. By the time Chloe graduated with honors, I'd finished my associate degree quietly, without a ceremony, without a party, without so much as a family dinner. Mom said, "We already have Chloe's graduation next week, 2 in a row is just too much chaos." At her Columbia graduation, they rented a suite, catered a brunch, and handed out champagne like it was tap water. When I showed up in my thrifted dress, Mom pulled me aside and said, "Don't mention your degree, okay? Today's about Chloe." That's when it hit me I'd been edited out of my own family narrative. Standing there, holding my plastic cup of warm champagne, watching everyone toast to Chloe's brilliance, something inside me quietly fractured. Not because I envied her, but because I finally saw the truth with brutal clarity. My parents didn't see me as someone worth investing in. And that realization wasn't just painful, it was catalytic. Because when you spend your whole life waiting for permission to be seen, the moment you stop waiting, That's when everything starts to change. The breaking point wasn't some huge, cinematic betrayal. It was smaller than that, quiet, almost forgettable. But it was the last straw. It was a Tuesday. I had just finished a double shift teaching English during the day and stocking shelves at night. My back ached, my feet were numb, and all I wanted was a hot shower and silence. Instead, I got a family group text. Mom, family dinner this Friday. Big news from Chloe. Dad, can't wait. So proud of our girl. Chloe, can't wait to share with you guys. Mom again. Lila, bring dessert. I stared at the screen. No one asked if I could make it. No one asked if I was working. Just an assumption that I'd show up, smiling, baked goods in hand, ready to clap for Chloe. Again. But I went. Of course I went. Because I still had that pathetic sliver of hope, the part of me that thought maybe this time would be different. Spoiler, it wasn't. Chloe announced she'd been offered a position at a consulting firm in Boston. 6 figures. A signing bonus. A relocation package. My parents cried. Literally cried. My mom hugged her like she just survived a shipwreck. My dad started listing nearby neighborhoods in Boston they could help her look at. Then my mom turned to me and said, "Maybe you could think about getting your teaching certificate online. That way you could have a backup plan if the tutoring thing dries up." Backup plan. The tutoring thing. I said nothing. Just smiled, like I'd practiced. Pretended the roast chicken wasn't suddenly dry in my mouth. Pretended I wasn't slowly drowning in their complete indifference. Later that night, as I helped load the dishwasher, my dad pulled me aside. "I hope you don't feel left out, kiddo. We're trying to help Chloe while she's on the upswing, you know?" That was it. That was the moment. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest. I looked him in the eye and said, "No worries, Dad. I get it now." He smiled, relieved, like I'd just absolved him. But I wasn't relieved. I was done. The next morning, I packed a duffel bag. I wrote a note, not dramatic, just clear. "Please stop inviting me to things just so I can play the understudy. I'm not interested in auditioning for your approval anymore." I blocked the family group chat. Changed my number. Moved out of my apartment and into a shared house across town. That was 3 years ago. And for 3 years I didn't hear from them except once, when Chloe emailed me from Boston. Just a simple, "I hope you're okay." I didn't answer. I wasn't angry anymore. But I wasn't going back. Because sometimes, survival isn't about forgiveness. It's about choosing peace over proximity. I didn't vanish. I just stopped performing. Life after cutting contact was quiet. A strange kind of freedom. No more strained smiles. No more forced applause at Chloe's every career milestone. No more being treated like I was made of spare parts. I rented a small room in a creaky old house with 3 roommates, and an orange cat named Crayon who liked to sit on my laptop keyboard whenever I worked. I took on more tutoring clients, eventually launched my own private education service online, local, word of mouth. Slowly it grew. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy. But I felt something I hadn't in years, whole. Meanwhile, I saw glimpses of my family through mutual acquaintances and social media. Chloe moved to Boston, got engaged to someone in tech, ran a half marathon, posted filtered photos with captions like, "Grateful for every step." And my parents? Still glued to her orbit. One friend of the family called me after a wedding we'd both skipped. "Your mom mentioned you," she said cautiously. "She said you've been distant." Distant. As if I'd drifted. Like I hadn't been pushed. I didn't bother correcting her. What would be the point? No one wants to hear about a slow-motion betrayal. It's not dramatic enough. Not sad enough to feel sorry for. But here's the truth, favoritism isn't always loud. Sometimes it's soft and steady, an erosion. A choice made 100 times, so small you don't notice until one day you're standing at the bottom of a canyon wondering when the ground gave out. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the college fund. It was the million ways they told me I was less bright, less worthy, less real. And you don't unhear that. Still, part of me wondered if I was being unfair. If I'd exaggerated it all. Maybe they hadn't meant harm. Maybe I was just overly sensitive. So when Chloe emailed me again, short, direct, just, "Can we talk?" I said yes. We met at a cafe halfway between our cities. She looked the same, polished, confident, expensive. She ordered a turmeric oat latte. I got black coffee. She said, I'm not here to defend Mom and Dad. I don't think they realize what they did. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. She continued, I used to think you were just angry. But I get it now. I think I always knew, deep down, that they bet on me and left you to figure it out alone. I blinked. That cracked something in me. Not because it hurt, but because it was finally being seen. She reached across the table. I'm sorry, Lila. I don't know if it helps, but you were always stronger than me. I just got more scaffolding. It didn't fix anything. But it softened something. Because maybe I didn't need my parents to admit their failure. Maybe it was enough that someone else had seen it too. The thing they never tell you about breaking away from your family is how long it takes to untangle their voice from your own. Even after I walked out of their lives, even after I deleted the group chat, changed my number, started over, I still heard them in my head. Every time I made a decision, every time I hesitated, every time I considered raising my prices or calling myself a business owner instead of just tutoring, I'd hear my mother's polite condescension. Maybe don't get ahead of yourself. Or my father's smirk, his signature line when I was younger. Not everyone's a Chloe. Their voices were ghosts. Persistent ones. So I started writing them letters. Not to send, just to get their words out of my body. I'd sit at my kitchen table late at night, write pages and pages, sometimes messy, sometimes cruel, and then I'd tear them up. Not for drama, but for release. It became my ritual. Instead of trying to convince them I mattered, I wrote myself back into existence. And with time, I realized something important: the version of me they had invested in, the practical, hands-on, low-maintenance daughter, wasn't me at all. It was just easier for them if I played small. Once I stopped doing that, I started to grow. Business picked up. I created structured tutoring programs for neurodiverse teens who'd been left behind by mainstream schools, kids who reminded me a lot of myself. I hired 2 assistants. I hosted a virtual summit for alternative education that actually trended locally. I got written about in a small but legit magazine under the headline, "The Tutor Who Said No and Built Her Own Classroom." When I read that line, I cried. Because for the first time in my adult life, someone had put my story in print, and it didn't begin with Chloe's sister. But even with all that growth, there was one thread I hadn't pulled: my parents. I hadn't heard from them in years. Chloe and I had started emailing sporadically, not close, but civil, and she'd occasionally mention them. I always skipped over those parts. I wasn't ready. Then one morning, I opened my inbox and found a message with a subject line that stopped my breath. "Please read from Mom." I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for days. Part of me felt like a teenager again, waiting to be told I was difficult, dramatic, ungrateful. But eventually, curiosity won. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs. "Isabella, we know it's been years. We've been trying to figure out how to reach you in a way that wouldn't feel like another dismissal. We've been doing therapy, not that it changes the past, but it's helped us look at things we didn't want to see before. You were right. About everything. We invested in Chloe because we were afraid of losing our shot at success. Of wasting money. Of being wrong. We thought you were strong enough not to need it. That's not fair. That's not love. If you're open to it, we'd like to talk. On your terms. No pressure. Just hope. Love. Mom and Dad." I read it 5 times. Then I closed it and didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood. I didn't need their apology to move forward. And I didn't need to forgive them on their schedule. Forgiveness isn't a performance. It's not an obligation. It's a boundary you choose or don't. That email didn't heal me. But it did something else. It validated me. It confirmed that I hadn't made it all up. That the things they did and didn't do had weight. That the hurt had reason. You know what's strange? Once you stop asking for love in the currency they're willing to give, you start to understand the cost of every compromise you made just to stay in the room. I used to think the worst thing my parents did was deny me a college fund. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The real damage was invisible. It was the way they trained me to expect less. To be grateful for scraps. I saw it everywhere, once I had distance. I remembered every school award ceremony where they brought Chloe flowers and left mine on the kitchen counter. Every dinner where they asked her about her classes and asked me if I had a boyfriend. Every time they told relatives I was the creative one. Like it was code for not going anywhere. When you grow up in a house where praise is rationed, you learn to hustle for crumbs. So I stopped hustling. I started speaking at local schools about educational equity. I pitched a podcast, Second Seat, about people who'd grown up overshadowed and got picked up by a small network. I interviewed first-gen college grads, middle siblings, backup quarterbacks. Anyone who knew what it felt like to be Plan B in someone else's story. The podcast blew up in ways I didn't expect. People wrote in from all over: a girl whose brother got a Tesla while she was told to take the bus, a guy whose sister got private lessons while he watched YouTube tutorials in his bedroom. All of them had one thing in common: they'd been told, subtly and not so subtly, that they didn't quite warrant the full effort. It was surreal. I'd built a whole life out of what they thought was my limit. One day, after a panel event, a woman in her 50s came up to me, teary-eyed. "I wish I'd had your voice when I was your age," she said. "I didn't realize I could leave." I hugged her. Not out of pity, but recognition. We'd both lived in the same silence. Around that time, Chloe invited me to her wedding. She didn't assume I'd come. Just sent a kind, simple invite. "You're welcome, but never obligated. You matter to me even if that's taken me too long to say out loud." I stared at that envelope for days. Not out of bitterness, but because I'd spent so long cutting ties, and now here was someone offering me connection without a hook. No guilt, no spin, no expectation. I decided to go. Not for them. For her. When I arrived, Chloe hugged me like she meant it, not out of pity, not to prove anything, just a real embrace between two people who'd grown into different versions of themselves. My parents were there, of course. Older, smaller than I remembered. My dad gave me the sheepish half-smile, like he didn't know if he was allowed to. My mom's eyes welled up, but she didn't rush toward me. I appreciated that. They were learning. During the reception, my mom eventually came over, plate in hand, and sat next to me. She didn't start with an apology. She just said, "You look happy." And weirdly, I was. Because I had built a life not despite them, but beyond them. We talked. Not deeply, but gently. She asked about my podcast. My work. She said she listened once. Then, carefully, "I didn't realize how many people felt like you." I nodded. "That's the problem. We don't realize until it's too late." She didn't argue. She just took my hand. And for the first time in a very long time, I let her. It didn't fix everything. But not everything has to be fixed. Some things just have to be seen. The thing about healing, real, unglamorous, uninstagrammable healing, is that it rarely looks how you expect it to. There's no fireworks, no cinematic music swelling in the background. Sometimes it's just you, folding laundry in silence, realizing you haven't thought about the people who hurt you in days. That's what happened to me. After Chloe's wedding, I didn't rush back into their lives. I didn't suddenly become the daughter who called every Sunday or sent Mother's Day cards with handwritten quotes. But I didn't block them again either. I kept the line open like a crack in a window. Not wide, but enough to let some air in. They didn't overstep. To their credit, they didn't flood in with a fake closeness or demand forgiveness on a deadline. They sent small texts spaced out. Updates. Photos of the dog. Dad once forwarded a podcast episode mine with a note that said, "This made me cry. You have a gift." That message made me sit down on the kitchen floor and just breathe. Not sob. Not rage. Just breathe. Because it was the first time he'd said I had a gift. Not that I was practical or hardworking. A gift. That word undid something in me. Or maybe it rewound it. Around that time, I started writing a book. Not a memoir, I wasn't ready for that, but a hybrid of personal essays and stories from people I'd interviewed. The through line? What it means to be less chosen in your own family and how you claw your way back from it. I titled it Seat at the Table. I wrote late at night, always with music playing, crayon curled up beside me like a purring paperweight. And slowly, chapter by chapter, I noticed something. The more I told my story, the less power it had over me. Not because it stopped hurting, but because I stopped carrying it alone. I sent Chloe an early draft of the intro. I was nervous. She was in it, after all. She called me 2 days later. "I cried on the subway," she said. "But not because I was mad. Because I finally understand why you left." I didn't realize until that moment how badly I needed her to say that. Not, "I forgive you." Not, "You should come back." Just. I get it. That's the thing no one tells you about estrangement. Sometimes the people left behind think you abandoned them. But the truth? Most of us didn't leave because we stopped caring. We left because we cared too long, too quietly, too painfully. We left because staying meant erasing ourselves a little more each year. And one day, we ran out of room. By the time the book sold to a mid-sized publisher, I had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment and hired a second assistant. My face was on a flyer for a speaker series. A former professor asked me to guest lecture. My parents saw the news online. They sent flowers. A card. Not a Hallmark one, but handwritten. We see you now. We're sorry it took so long. I didn't cry. I smiled. And then I went for a walk. I didn't call them. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I no longer needed it to breathe. That's what they don't tell you about healing. It's not about turning pain into pride. It's about no longer letting pain make your decisions for you. I wasn't the daughter they invested in. I wasn't the golden girl. I wasn't the one they placed bets on. But I became the one they now followed. Because while they were busy investing in Chloe, I was investing in myself. And that turned out to be the better stock. They always say, blood is thicker than water. Like it's a moral compass. Like the fact that someone shares your DNA should somehow outweigh the years of small wounds they left behind. But here's what I've learned: blood only means something when there's love to hold it in place. And sometimes, love has conditions. And healing means choosing yourself when no one else will. The book came out in fall. Small press, modest release, nothing flashy. But the response? Overwhelming. Emails, messages, letters from people all over the country. Adult children who'd been the easy one, the backup plan, the afterthought. People who said, "You put words to a silence I've been living in for years." I remember one message in particular. A woman my age wrote, "My brother got a house down payment. I got told to build character. I thought I was crazy until I read your story." That message lived on my fridge for 6 months. Not because I needed praise, but because it reminded me I wasn't alone. Chloe came to the launch party. She wore a simple navy dress and brought me sunflowers, like she used to when we were kids. She introduced me to her fiancé as my sister, the author. Not my twin. Not the one who. Just my sister. She stayed by my side the whole night. When people asked which stories were true, she'd just smile and say, "Every family's got layers." Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and I stood with a glass of cheap wine in hand, I saw my parents at the door. I hadn't invited them. But Chloe had. They looked older than I remembered. Not just in age and posture. In apology. My mom held a bouquet. My dad wore a tie that didn't quite match. For once, they looked like people who weren't sure they were welcome. And in that moment, I realized something. I had the power now. Not power over them. Not revenge. Just presence. I had grown into myself without their permission. I didn't need validation. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I'd already picked myself. They came up slowly. My mom handed me the flowers. My dad reached out a hand. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there, four adults with history between them and possibility ahead. We read the book. My dad said, voice low. All of it. My mom nodded. We had to read it twice. Once to argue with it. Once to understand it. I didn't say anything. I just let that hang. We were wrong, she said. For a long time. And we thought silence would fix it. But you turned that silence into something we couldn't ignore. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 10 years. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I'm not erasing what happened either. Good, she whispered. You shouldn't. We talked for a while. Not about the past. About now. About Crayon the cat, about my next book idea, about a school district that wanted to adapt my tutoring model. They listened. Not politely, fully. And when they left, I didn't feel relief or regret. I felt peace. Not the kind where everything is fine. The kind where you finally accept that it doesn't have to be. After they were gone, Chloe slipped her arm through mine. You were never the backup, she said. You were the foundation. I'm sorry I let them forget that. I leaned my head on her shoulder. It's okay. I remembered for all of us. That night, as I walked home under streetlights and soft wind, I thought about all the years I spent asking for crumbs. All the birthdays with no card, all the skip ceremonies, all the times I told myself, it's fine, I don't need much. But I did. I needed everything. And I gave it to myself. So here I am. Not the favorite. Not the golden girl. Just Lila whole, seen, and unshakably mine. That, in the end, was the best investment I ever made.